What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're in my garage, bit of a different format than usual. Just want to switch things up a little bit. I spend a lot of time on this bike when I'm recording, and sometimes I'm just trying to talk about some things and there's a whole bunch of wind noise. I thought maybe for a change, maybe you guys just want to not destroy your ears if you're using earbuds or something like that. If you have YouTube Premium, turn off the phone, just listen to it as is. But basically, I've had this bike for a couple months now, and I've come to a conclusion that I'd like to share with the public, or for anyone that is looking to purchase this bike or a bike like this, because I think, honestly, this conclusion may be applicable to more than just the Ninja 500. So like I said, I've owned this bike for a couple of months now. I bought it in April, and it's now middle of July. I got it April 16th. So it's just about, let's see here, it's actually July 16th. What a coincidence. Okay, so May, June, July. Okay, so 3 months now. I've had it for 3 months. And I use it at the very least about 3, maybe 4 days, sometimes every day of the week for my commute to work and to other places besides work. And I've come to a conclusion that this is probably one of the best commuters that you can possibly own. And like I said, this may apply to, in fact, I think it does apply anyways to other motorcycles and other two-wheeled vehicles for that matter. As long, and I also want to just make one thing clear, as long as you don't need to carry more than a backpack's full of stuff on your daily commute, I think this thing's pretty dang good as an option for that. Now, I want to get something out that's obvious, because I know people might grill me in the comments, so to speak. It's not the safest way to commute. However, in a perfect world, as long as you're not hitting anybody, you're not getting hit, and you're not being too irresponsible, I do think this is one of the best commuters that you can possibly buy. And the reason for that being is, specifically for this bike, all right, let me take this back. There's a couple of reasons why. Let's start off, I got the obvious con out of the way, but let me go for the obvious pro. The gas mileage is phenomenal. If you're driving this conservatively, I have gotten the little miles per gallon thing, the little thing that tells you your average. I've gotten it up to about 70 miles per gallon, so that's pretty sick. Not that you're gonna be able to get that the entire time. My average, considering, I'm not always gonna be driving this thing super conservatively, is right around 55. It's between 50 and 60 miles per gallon, so that's a little bit more realistic. I'd say if you're really trying to stay conservative, you're probably gonna get an average of about 60 miles per gallon. But the way that I drive it, I get right in between the 50 and 60 mark. So I mean, compared to other vehicles that I drive, I got a Jeep. Sometimes I'll drive a Durango. You'll be spending if I'm driving something like a Jeep Wrangler, that thing is about 15, 16 miles a gallon on regular fuel. To fill up, it takes about $50 to $60, depending on prices. And I usually have to fill up at least twice a week for my commute personally. So that can be between $100 to $120 on a weekly basis. This, on the other hand, is more like the way I'm driving it. I'll probably still have to fill up maybe 1 to 1.5 times a week. However, to fill this tank of gas, it's $13. 13 if it's empty, maybe 17. So it holds 3.7 gallons. So if I take out my phone, gas around my parts of town are usually between $3 and $4. Let's be conservative, do $3.5 times 3.7. Yeah, so about 13. I got 12.95 and 13. That's very realistic. That's very similar to what I usually see when I do fill this thing up. So that's a huge savings right there. And not even to take into account just the grand scheme of things. When you're paying for insurance on a car, it's a lot more. I personally pay $70 a month for the insurance on this. And for a monthly payment, because I did finance this, I know it's not the greatest idea, I'm not gonna get into why I did that, but for the monthly payment just to pay this thing off, it's about $140 a month. Now, me personally, I'm not like just doing the minimum payment. However, if you were to do that, you know, 70 plus 140, and then taking into account how much you're paying for gas, it's significantly lower than just the amount that you're paying in gas for a car, not including, you know, a possible monthly payment on that car, not including the insurance on that car. So in terms of cost to do your commute, this is gonna win every time. I think it's gonna beat a Prius. You know, a Prius is like the most fuel efficient car that you can get. I'm sure there might be something different, but I know you can tune those Priuses to get like 50, 60, maybe 70 miles. I don't know about 70 miles a gallon, but I know you can tune them to even crank even more gas mileage out of them, which is pretty interesting. But just for how much this thing costs to get it, it's pretty incredible, the fuel savings. Now, another pro. Let's say you were to compare this to a Prius. Like, let's say you were debating on getting two options, right? Either a motorcycle or a Prius. I would argue that you're gonna have a lot more fun driving this every day than you are going to on a Prius. I'm a firm believer that if you're gonna drive every day of your life, and this is part of the reason I'm into cars and I'm, you know, recently now getting into motorcycles, is because, you know, if you're gonna drive every single day of your life, why not drive something that puts a smile on your face? You know, you could be driving maybe you don't care about cars, you know, maybe that doesn't put a smile on your face, but I just wouldn't be surprised, even for someone that's not into cars, if they were to get behind, okay, if they're driving a Toyota Corolla on their daily basis, they've been driving that thing for, I don't know, 5 years now, and you put them behind the wheel of, let's say, a Mustang, okay? They're probably gonna have some fun with that Mustang. It's still kind of similar in terms of the ride height, and, you know, maybe the Mustang's gonna handle a little bit better, but, you know, they're gonna hear that engine, they're gonna experience some of that power and that torque. It's gonna, you know, handle the corners a little bit sharper. They're probably gonna have fun with it. I mean, they might not, but I would assume that they're probably gonna enjoy it more than driving their Corolla. Now, I think the same thing comes to if you were to drive a super fuel efficient car versus if you were to drive this. I think you're gonna have more fun driving this. So, what I would say about that is it'll keep you from becoming depressed. On to my next point. Some of the reason that vehicles like a Mustang or like this are fun to drive is because they come with an inherent risk. And that's, you know, you're driving something that's fast and it's nimble, and for the most part it's less safe than other options. And obviously that's kind of counting itself, which I'll touch on later. But what I'm getting at is, at least this kind of limits you. For example, let's say you were to go for a higher power motorcycle. You're thinking to yourself, you know, it's still this lightweight vehicle with a small engine. It's still gonna be pretty fuel efficient. But that's not really true. When you get up to those 1000cc bikes, they get pretty similar gas mileage to cars, for that matter. Like a Kawasaki Ninja H2, I mean, I know that's a very extreme example, but I think it gets between 20 and 30 miles a gallon. That's pretty comparable to cars, like average cars. Obviously that might be when you're driving fast too, you might get that kind of area of miles per gallon, but you know, you're probably also gonna drive faster if you go with that kind of an option. You're probably gonna put yourself at more risk if you get a faster motorcycle. Like if you have more power at your disposal, you're probably gonna use it more often. This, on the other hand, it has a very fun amount of power. It's so much fun, but it's not too much where you're gonna be putting yourself in danger. Because as humans, I mean, listen, I'm a human, you're a human obviously watching this. You know how we are. You know, if we have something that we maybe aren't supposed to, like, we're gonna take advantage of it. Like, we just take advantage of things as humans. We take things for granted, and you're just gonna use that power if you have a more powerful bike, and then it's gonna take your gas mileage. And at the end of the day, you know, if you look at the statistics, right? If you're gonna drive a motorcycle every single day as your daily commuter, which at the end of the day probably isn't a great idea, you're gonna be putting yourself at higher risks. And especially if you are traveling at those speeds, those higher speeds on a more frequent basis, it just leads more opportunity for things to go wrong. So this, on the other hand, you can still hit 100 miles per hour, which is, let's be honest, faster than you really need to go. So you can still have fun on it. You can still enjoy the ride to the most that you really need to. You still have the acceleration. You still, you can use these gears and not go felony speeds, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just a very fun way to get back and forth from work where you're not gonna be putting yourself at extremely high risks. Don't get me wrong, you're still on a motorcycle, you still have that risk, but I'm also still a firm believer where I think if you take the right precautions, you can drastically reduce your chances of getting in an accident. If you keep your eyes peeled, if you act like everyone's trying to kill you on the road, stay away from cars, don't stick around in people's blind spots. And let me go back to that. I think really the biggest thing is just staying away from other cars. Intersections, I think you should avoid intersections. But if you're gonna go through them, just like keep an eye on that opposing turn lane. Make sure they're not gonna turn out in front of you. Give them time to see you. I just think that this will, at the very least, it's not the most dangerous motorcycle you can be on. And I think it's the perfect limit. It's the perfect ratio of having fun to still limiting you when it comes to the power. But yeah, so those are pretty much my pros. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I would say, but let's move on to the cons. There's very obvious cons. Obviously, okay, first con, you're on a motorcycle, you're more susceptible to getting hurt. Another con, you can't ride it. You can ride it in the rain, but weather conditions may affect you a little bit more than when you're in a car. I live in Michigan, so it snows for half the year. Or not half the year, but more like a fourth. And, you can't ride this in the snow, that's just all there is to it. You can ride it in the wintertime when the roads are clear, but you're not gonna be riding it in the snow. I actually know many people that, or not many people, but I've heard stories, and I know a guy that would basically, this was his only mode of transportation. So even in the wintertime, he'd be using it to get back and forth from work. And even for me, I used to have a moped, like I've said on this channel many, many times, and I was working as a busboy at a restaurant, and I would use it all the time to get back and forth from work in the wintertime. So it is possible, if you're in a situation where you're really just trying to make ends meet, I would consider something like this as a commuter to save the money. We're in a very tough economy right now, but let me just, let me make sure we're sticking to the cons here. It's not the best when it comes to the weather. It's really good when the weather's good and good conditions, but it's definitely a pretty bad option when the weather's not in the greatest of conditions. Another con, you can't carry that much stuff. If you have a commute where you need to be bringing a lot of stuff to work and you can't put it all in a backpack, either you get a bike with more storage to fit those needs, but if it gets to a point where it's things you just can't put on a two-wheel vehicle, then obviously this is out of the picture for you. Another con is you can't really carpool on these things. Like, yeah, you can fit two people on there. If you ask me, I wouldn't love to be the passenger on one of these. I've been passengers on a moped before, it's really not that bad, but just, when it comes to the power that is behind the hands, like, I just feel like you're giving a lot of responsibility to the person that's behind the handlebars of this thing. But besides that, those are really just the things to consider if you yourself are maybe considering commuting on a motorcycle. But it's a conclusion that I came to, because I personally don't use this every single time on my commute. However, when I do, I've just noticed personally, like, there's more I have more money to work with. Like, I notice, I can definitely feel the financial benefits, and I'm always looking forward to basically getting on this thing, whether it's when I wake up in the morning or at the end of the day, or if I have to even run an errand or do something, go somewhere after my work day. It makes you look forward to doing the things throughout your day, if I'm being honest. So maybe that's another pro I can add after my list of cons. It definitely makes, it's something to, it's not like, the most exciting thing of my day, but it makes the day just a little bit more exciting. It's something to look forward to as you're completing your day. So that's pretty much all I had to say. But if you do have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, please let me know in the comments. I would love to start a discussion. Do you think this is a good commuter vehicle? Let me know. Have you commuted on a motorcycle? Let me know. And yeah, besides that, just be sure to like, subscribe. And yeah, besides that, get one more look at the bike. I did just want to showcase one thing. I did put this fender eliminator. It's the Yoshimura one. It's pretty slick. I don't have the key on me right now, but a cool thing about it is on the stock fender, oh my gosh, on the stock, it did have a halogen light that was right above to illuminate the license plate, but this one's now LED, so it just makes the bike look a little bit cooler. Some stickers on there, I don't know, maybe I'll take them off, but they're just kind of to make it look a little bit more like my own. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Is a Ninja 500 / any sport bike in this CC category a good commuter? Let me know in the comments below. Over and out.